I believe your belief in self is the most critical piece, most critical component of your ability to advance your brand, your business, your goals as an entrepreneur. If you don't believe it can happen, the chances of it actually coming to pass are slim.
Welcome again to the Business of Marketing. I'm A. Lee Judge.
And I'm Rocio Osuna.
And today we're going to help you rethink your personal brand with our special guest. We're also going to get some insight as to what's happening with the government versus AI buzz. And we'll talk about some major companies, how some major companies are working to get employees to be more comfortable using AI. Plus, as we talk to our guest, you'll learn more about who Mindy is, and maybe even learn an interesting fact about the artist formerly known as Prince and how he managed his personal brand, because our guest coming up is going to tell us all about personal brand. So before we get into that, a couple things we want to talk about. Rocio, have you heard about what's going on between the Pentagon and OpenAI and Anthropic?
Not very much. You want to tell me a little bit more?
Yeah. So, of course, both of these major AI companies have contracts or had contracts with the government. And Anthropic seemed, I say seemed because I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but seemed to take the more moral route and did not want to do business with the government based on having autonomous weapons or surveillance of U.S. citizens using their software. So there's an article, and this is reading from Reuters. It says, U.S. judge says Pentagon's blacklisting of Anthropic looks like punishment for its views on AI safety. It goes on to say that a U.S. judge said on Tuesday that the Pentagon's blacklisting of Anthropic looked like an effort to punish the artificial intelligence lab for going public with its concerns about AI safety in the military. The unprecedented designation, which followed Anthropic's refusal to allow the military to use its Claude AI software for U.S. citizen surveillance or autonomous weapons, blocks Anthropic from certain military contracts. So, you may be asking what this means for you. Well, Anthropic's decision was the first time a U.S. company has been publicly designated as a supply chain risk. Now, you usually hear that from maybe software or products from China or other countries, but not from a U.S. company. And if Anthropic doesn't win this battle, it means that your company will have to disclose or that you're using Claude or any other Anthropic product, which in turn would keep your company from maybe continuing or winning government contracts or government-funded contracts. And I'll give you an example. My company, Content Monster, we may do a podcast for, let's say, a local forestry service. Well, the forestry service is funded by the government. That means we have to disclose, what software we use, if there's any risks there. So that means a lot of companies, you could be washing cars, washing government vehicles under contract, which has nothing to do with your software, but your contract will ask you what software you use. And if something like Anthropic is a security risk, then you can't get that contract or keep that contract if you're using their software. So the ramifications for this could be pretty big if the government is literally banning software companies from being used, especially with, what they're accusing, what Anthropic is saying is, this is just you getting back at us. There's no real, any bigger risk. And at the same time, there's nothing different going on with OpenAI. It's just that it's the government possibly, according to what they're countersuing, is that it's just a personal thing. There's no real reason. So if your company uses Anthropic and you have government contracts, this is something you need to keep your eye on. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's so much AI ingrained in work. I read a Wall Street Journal article today that talked about how the chief tech officer is implementing AI for work. So it's not just an initiative or like a little nudge to their employees to start using AI. It's more a performance metric now. So that's wild to think that there's a lot of companies now not just nudging you. Now it's like you're required to use it. It reminds me of a session I just went to at B2B Marketing Exchange where Dane Vahey from OpenAI mentioned, how do we get our employees to utilize more AI? And he had like 7 steps to go. One of them being start prompting. Make it a goal to prompt at least 10 different times a day. It's just ingrained in companies now. AI is part of your performance metric, and start using it now if you're not.
I'm old enough, this is going to really, really date me, but to remember when people would have on their resume that they knew how to use Microsoft Office, they know how to use Word or Excel. That was on the resumes. And now it's like, why would you add that? That's assumed that you're going to use it. And you're not qualified for this job at all if you don't. I think we're heading the same place for AI. And so if you are against AI, just know you're heading to a place, if you're going to be an employee, the people who are most efficient at using AI will be the ones who will be most in demand as an employee. And they'll be the ones who will be most successful as an employee if they use AI as one of their regular skills.
And I totally agree. It's part of many job descriptions I've seen recently. AI is part of the requirements and the nice to haves as part of, hiring a new employee.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit and get on to our guest today. We mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about personal brand, give you some interesting tidbits you probably didn't know about some celebrities' personal brands, and also maybe what may happen if you have a personal brand that you don't even know you have in your workplace, and how you can learn about that and maybe make it better. So our guest today, he runs a marketing agency deeply focused on helping businesses and individuals develop a better branding strategy. He's an engaging keynote speaker, and he also has a community that I hope he'll tell us about of entrepreneurs and personal brand builders. So check out the conversation with our guest today, Mr. Rod Brinson. Mr. Brinson, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man. Happy to be here.
Hey, we're happy to have you. I want to get straight into it. Now, your agency focuses a lot on brand and brand strategy, and lately I've seen you do a lot of work on personal brand. So where is the intersection between a business's brand and one's own personal brand?
I get this question a lot. I think it's because there are personalities, points of views that don't always sync up when it comes to these two things, personal branding versus business branding. And my take on it is like this. I believe that every personal brand should be professional like a business brand. And I also believe that every business brand has to be personable like a personal brand. It's to the point now where founders, CEOs, the people that matter within the company represent the brand greatly. And they could be the catalyst for things going well or things falling apart. So it's less about having a faceless brand, which I know a lot of people are very interested in. That's, to do with their introvertedness or lack of desire to see themselves on camera. And it has a lot more to do with their personality shining through, their unique value kind of being in the spotlight so that people can be attracted to the services and products that they have to offer. I'll end by saying this, take me, for instance, my personal brand is a big part of what I do, but it also affects my marketing agency ability to shine through and be chosen in a sea full of other marketing agencies. So um, I would say that you have to have a blended approach to both. And even if you don't care to have a personal brand, you have one anyway. So you might as well work on it.
So expand on that. You have one anyway. For those folks who say, I'm not going to work on it, I'm not going to create one, but you say, like it or not, you have one anyway. What does that mean?
If you're working a corporate 9 to 5, your personal brand is following you around from Zoom call to Zoom call, from meeting room to meeting room, from one-on-ones to, talking with your coworker at the coffee machine. They are getting to know who you are and what they were, are reminded of when they talk to you. The way you smell, the way you talk, the way you treat people, all of that stuff affects your personal brand within that office space or that virtual office space. It's no different from entrepreneurship. It's no different from being a student in college. Everywhere you go, you're leaving a track record and a footprint for who you are. And so social media, emails, everything is the same thing. So my point to you is if you're human, if you're living this thing called life, you have a personal brand. What you do with it is what's going to determine whether or not people are attracted to you or repelled from you. And the last thing I'll say on that is you're either building your brand by default or by design.
By default, or by design. That reminds me, just yesterday, I had an executive at a large corporation we all know. They were talking about some of their um, direct reports, and that one of them they were known as a phrase like messy Mindy. And everybody knew that. It was like a regular, like it was her last name. They all knew that except for her. And when someone was about to assign them a project, other person said, "What? You giving that to messy Mindy?" And they knew exactly what they were talking about. So I guess that's the brand that she didn't even know she had.
Yeah, and that's the point. Like, it will follow you around whether you're in the room or not. And, I think that when you're living it by default, you have more chances or you're more susceptible to people calling you Messy Mindy. But if you're spending time and you're like really making decisions and being intentional about it, right? You're doing it by design. You're thinking about those things when you move around. When you say, "Hey, I'm gonna get that project to you, by Friday end of day," and it's Monday the next week and you're still not done, people are going to begin to label you accordingly. And so that's why you have to be super laser focused and intentional about the footprint that you leave behind and everybody that every path that you cross.
If you're messy Mendy, how do you change that personal branding? How do you go about it without being mean or confrontational? How do you weave that storyline?
It takes a moment to build a reputation, years and years. And, if you're trying to do it the right way, and it takes even less of a moment to, have it come crashing down. And, it's just the unfortunate thing. It's just like when you're, in school, grade school, and you're trying to get, you know, a perfect score, A, whatever it is on the exam, and you get one question wrong, and now you're down to a B, right? The way you rebuild that is to first recognize it. If you don't know that it needs work, then you're literally going to just live in the same vein, right? But if you hear wind of it, or even if you don't hear wind of it, and you just want to improve on your brand or make sure that your brand is not being labeled as Messy Mindy, you have to take a deep introspective look into who you are. You have to figure out, okay, who am I behind closed doors? Who am I when no one is looking? Who am I when there's nothing on the line to lose or gain? And taking that introspective audit of self will give you a few pieces that you can begin to work on. As you begin to work on those things, the external pieces will start to come clear, and you'll see like, man, maybe I shouldn't have responded to my coworker this way, or maybe I shouldn't have treated that client who did me wrong this way. You'll start to look at self first instead of looking externally, saying, must be something wrong with them, right? And once you make some of those changes, people around you will begin to notice it. And I'm only speaking this way because I've literally lived that life corporately and in my personal life and in entrepreneurship. The self changes that you make will make people around you start to look at you completely different.
That brings up a good question for me. So, for the people that are hesitant to, come up with a personal brand or handle a personal brand, what are the first few steps for them to actually start on their personal branding journey?
Part of my framework that I've had to develop over the years, working with business owners and helping them to establish their brands, begins with belief. I believe your belief in self is the most critical piece, most critical component of your ability to advance your brand, your business, your goals as an entrepreneur. If you don't believe it can happen, the chances of it actually coming to pass are slim. Now, that doesn't mean some hocus pocus. Oh, I believe it, so I don't have to do anything. I can just sit here and it's gonna happen, right? I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is your chances increase greatly if you believe it, and they decrease greatly if you don't. So my framework for brand is the acronym for that exact word. B is for belief, R is for roadmap, A is for appearance, N is for network, and D is for drive. I don't have time to go through all of those, but I do want to just clearly say that belief, I will literally spend 3 months with a client working on belief alone. Because if you don't have the proper mechanics in your belief system for self, for the product, the service that you offer, etc., as soon as you run into a little adversity or a hurdle or a wall comes and you fall, you're gonna quit. You're gonna go back to the drawing board and say, "This is not for me." So to wrap it all around, the person on the other end of this podcast who's wonderingly and they're like, I don't really know if I want to do it. I'm not a personable person. I don't like, my personal brand doesn't, why should that have anything to do with my business? Trust me, where we're going, 2026, 2027, 2028, the more artificial we get, the more your art has to become official. So you have to put a little bit of work and energy behind your personal brand so that people want to connect with you and have a relationship with you.
And all of that speaks very much to why I immediately connected. 9 months ago, I was laid off and it all became real, right? So, what do you do next? Personal brand. It's unfortunate that a lot of us in the seat in the layoff, that's where you start. LinkedIn has been, increase in users based on people being laid off. And so they start their personal brand. My own journey, I said, I have to take the lead, right? It's my personal brand. So I started to really start posting, start sharing. And like you said, there was a hesitance of how much should I share, like the videos and whatnot. But having started this journey several months ago, like you mentioned, so many wonderful things have come out of it. One of them being this particular podcast and other wonderful things that have happened with me, with being invited to conferences, being invited to events, covering things that I would have never thought I could, based on the fact that I took the reins and I said, this is my personal brand. I'm taking it over. This is me.
Absolutely. And I just want to hit on something really quick because there may be other listeners out here who are in the same position, right? They're recently laid off, or maybe they've been laid off for some time and they're not really sure of direction to go in. You said something key. You said, I started my personal brand. And I want to just kind of change the language around that because your personal brand started before you got laid off, right? The relationships you were building, the network and the connections. I'm sure you can DM some of those people that you've made those relationships with, and maybe there's an opportunity there for something else, etc. You and your personal brand will follow you no matter where you go. I have CEOs that I used to work under that I still am in conversation with. And guess what happens as I continue to grow from my branding and marketing perspective? There may be a conference or something that they're doing with their company where they want to pull me in as an expert to speak on that. That's because of the personal brand I set when I was working under them at the coffee machine and on the emails and things of that nature. So no, you didn't start your personal brand. All you're doing is exposing it in a different way. And it feels uncomfortable because you're not used to it. But the more you get used to it, the more comfortable you will be doing it.
I like your reframe.
I want to add on to that or ask you about that because what Rocio has done is she made herself visible. Like her brand, she purposely made it visible. And often people are afraid of, they feel like it's self promotion instead of just becoming visible. In fact, again, the reason why we met was because I began seeing her frequently on LinkedIn. And then we ended up at the same conference. And this person whose face I was already familiar with seeing walks up on me. And I was excited to see her because I was like, oh, this is a real person in real life. And so we connected. And then I was like, you know what? Anybody who hustles this hard, I want to be connected to them. And so I was like, hey, a few months later, hey, will you be my co-host on this podcast? Because I'm with you. I'm with whatever you're doing and whatever your hustle is. I dig your brand. So let's do something together. So, and you mentioned LinkedIn too. Got a stat that I heard from LinkedIn recently. Said there was a 35% increase in people who have turned on their open to work feature, either privately or publicly. So my question is that a wake up call to everybody to work on their personal brand and be more visible?
Absolutely. Without a doubt. We live in a attention society. It's an attention-based society. And the companies, the people, the industries, the entities that have attention are winning. It's a commodity, right? And that's why people are willing to pay for it. That's why Super Bowl commercials will always have a line out of the door, no matter what price they sell it for, because they know that the attention that is put on that brand is going to determine what the next year for that brand looks like, right? And so it's no different when you come down to this molecular level where we're just humans, right? And it's like, all right, I'm going to post more. Like you said, you started to see her more, and what it said to you in your mind was, wow, this person is on it. I want to be associated with that. I want to surround myself with that kind of energy. It's no different from anybody else. I have experienced exactly what you just mentioned. And the key is this, there's an invisible metric. You're never going to hear a stat about 75% of people that didn't like or visit this website. You know why? Because you can't measure it. Now, does that mean it's not happening? How many times have you pulled your phone out, scrolled past 6 videos, stopped at 1, laughed, kept scrolling, and didn't action anything? You're seeing stuff, but there's nobody measuring that piece. So the question is more so, why would you not want to be seen? Because you never know who's watching, and you never know how that's going to tie into something that you ultimately want. So if you're embarrassed, if you're shameful, if you don't know, you don't feel comfortable, I would suggest you work on those things. Get really comfortable being exactly who you are. And I'll say this without going in too deep. I think that that's part of the problem. A lot of people see and compare, and they say, "Oh, well, she's prettier. He talks better. I like his camera more. I don't have that. So maybe I shouldn't do anything." Please, by all means, start where you are and build up, but don't compare yourself. Find out what makes you uniquely you, tap into that, get really confident about that piece, and then display it to the world because somebody is literally waiting on you to do just that.
It's true.
Awesome.
But really great points. I think um, people talk about being authentic. You know, people do business with people, not with companies. And the more authentic you are, specifically on LinkedIn, the more you're visible. Is there a limit to you, do you think? Is there such a thing as going too far with your personal brand?
I'll preface that by saying that's where the work behind the door happens and makes that where you can't go too far. That's where who you are when no one's looking becomes a very big thing. All right. When you think about the Coldplay concert incident, right? Somebody wasn't doing the work behind closed doors to make sure that when they're on the jumbo screen, that things are okay, right? But guess what would have happened if they did? Now it would have been a moment of promotion instead of a moment of shame. Now it would have been like, "Hey, John, we saw you at the Coldplay. That was cool that you were on the jumbo screen doing that cool dance." No, completely different career trajectory now because the internal work wasn't being done. So to that point, I know that, everybody's not going to be put on a jumbo screen, but you never know when your moment will happen, right? So it's like do the work necessary so that when you get put in a compromising position, you don't have to worry about your integrity and your character be on trial, right? The main thing that you're worrying about at that point is how can you take advantage of the situation? So to circle back and answer your question, I believe a person should only be as open with their personal lives on social media as they feel comfortable, right? I post me and my son talking in the grocery store about cereal all the time, or Jordan versus LeBron, or new music versus old, and I will post that same stuff that's fun and for TikTok on LinkedIn because I don't separate who I am depending on the room I'm in. I'm exactly who I am everywhere. I'll speak at a barbecue with my family members in the same way that I'll speak in a boardroom with CEOs that I don't know. And the reason is I'm authentic. And the only way to get authentically yourself in public light is to be authentic with who you are when nobody's around.
Very good point.
I'll give some weight to that because I'm still working on doing more of that myself. And I've seen both of you do that very well already. Because, and I think what people get held back by is worrying about what someone will think in their professional world about their personal stuff. But the reality is, if I see someone doing something that I like to do in my personal life, now I like that person more, right? So, for example, oh, they've got kids too, or they like to go skateboarding too, or they like the beach too, or they like cake too. Something makes a connection with that person. I remember them. And then the other business stuff, it takes care of itself. I still know you're a marketer. I still know you have an agency. That's all still there. But now I'm able to make a human connection with you to say, okay, not only are they qualified, I also kind of like them. That makes a difference.
You just said it at the end, Lee. I also kind of like them. Don't even know the person from who shot John, but you saw something, you heard something, they posted something, and it made you say to yourself, ah, I learned something new about this person. I feel closer to this person. I feel like I could sit around this person and have lunch or a coffee. I actually kind of want to do it so I can learn more. But it would not have happened if they were just all put together all the time, only showing the professional side, only showing, the professionally shot videos when, speaking of women, like your makeup and hair is done. And, no, sometimes it's okay to just be you. You just got to
It's
get
not just the
comfortable with it.
women. I mean, hey,
That was just an example. Just
I'm
an
about to
example.
lose all of this. Some days I have what I call my Homer Simpson hair. I have just 2, 3 hairs sticking up in the middle. And I don't record because of that. And I was like, no, Lee, you got to throw in a cap or something, just get it done.
Now, to that point, I will say this really quick because you brought up a good point. I do believe that your brand matters, right? You think about Hormozy, right? He's lumberjack, tape across his nose, beard. That's his brand. I can't even imagine seeing him in a three-piece suit, right? It just wouldn't fit at this point. But he was okay with whatever anybody had to say about that part of his brand before he was the multimillionaire, right? And so he developed a sense of confidence in being who he was, no matter where he was. And that's the exact thing I'm trying to say. You shouldn't have to, prep yourself up and make sure everything is perfectly done right with your hair and all of that stuff in order to post. But at the same time, be mindful who you're putting yourself out is going to be the first impression for 80% of the people that see it. So what's that impression going to say about you? And what do you want it to say about you? So it matters.
Rose, do you have another question? Because I got one I might want to close on if you don't.
Actually, I think you touched upon it with the non-negotiables. I think your question.
No, no,
Well,
no. I feel like it's a questionnaire. So I'm gonna just take over this interview. What I want you
Go
to do is
ahead.
think about your own personal brand. I want you to feel like this is your moment. Like, let's just imagine you paid me $10,000 to talk to me right now. What question would you ask to continue to develop your brand?
I always think about, starting your own brand. Like I said, I started my own brand, but I didn't start my own band, right? What are the non-negotiables of building a personal brand today? Is it just about consistency and specific visual vibe, or is it something deeper, like having a challenging perspective that actually cuts through the industry noise?
I did a speech on this at an event a few months back, and it was actually the title of my entire 60-minute moment. It was the non-negotiables of a personal brand. So I feel, tied to this question, and I owe you a responsibility of giving you a great answer here. So I'm gonna center it down to say this: the main non-negotiable in building a brand is to make yourself distinguishable. Otherwise, all you're doing is extinguishing your flame. When you put yourself in a room full of people that do exactly what you do, and there's one customer, there's 25 of y'all trying to get this one customer, what's going to make you stand out? What's going to make you memorable? What's going to make you unique? Well, the best way to do that is to distinguish yourself, distinguish yourself with something special to you. So figuring out what that is going to be the catalyst for everything else around your brand. Most people get it backwards and they want to focus on the logo and the color palette and the type of reel that they want to post and things. Those are the external features that come after you've done the deep work. So figuring out what makes you unique and standing on that is going to literally set a fire and a blaze to your path. And I think, when it comes down to it, no one on this earth before you or after you has what you have. So why not figure out what that is and put it on display? So that's the only non-negotiable I'm going to give you today, but there are like 4 others. You have to connect with me offline to get those 4 because we don't have time to go through them.
Well, before you're off the hook, I'm going to challenge that. And only from the standpoint of people who are listening to this are going to have a yeah, but, or yeah, but for me, So I want to ask this question for the yeah, but people. I can't say I haven't been one myself at sometimes. In terms of non-negotiable, what about the yeah, but, like, yeah, but I can't dress this way in that group, or yeah, but I'm a woman or a person of color, or too short, too tall, too old. What about those yeah, buts? For example, I never wear suits, right? I'm not Alex Hormozy. Let's say I was that person, right? What happens if Alex Hormozy wasn't who he is, but he has to go to a corporate meeting And he's like, yeah, but I don't wear suits. But he knows that room is going to be full of suits, right? So how does that person who knows that they are, fully tatted down, but they put on a jacket when they go into a certain environment, or they're going to be the only person of color in the room, or, they love hip hop music and everybody in the room likes country. So you don't talk about your favorite music because, but that might not work for me. It worked for them. Like Gary Vee can go into a crowd with a t-shirt, and a hat on backwards. But me, I'm a woman. I'm a man. I'm a black person. I can't do that. Where does that, how do you answer that? Yeah, but I'm different.
The first thing is, who wrote that rule? Who told you couldn't do that? Like, that's the first thing I have to say, because Gary Vee has been Gary Vee since before he was Gary Vee. And he was wearing the t-shirts and the hats and doing the wine interviews on YouTube and cursing and all the things that he's currently doing. Of course, he's enhanced it and he's kind of, gotten comfortable, and he's a millionaire now, so he doesn't have to, jump through as many hoops. But he's always been Gary Vee. And I could say the same thing about Eric Thomas. I could say the same thing about Hormozy, Steve Jobs. You have to be confident in who you are. And guess what? If you lose that deal, or they don't want to accept you because of whoever you are, then it's probably a good thing for you. You have to be okay with that. I'll tell you a quick story that I heard. I didn't know this, but recently I heard that Prince opened up for the Rolling Stones when he was younger in his career. He won the job as their warm-up band. And the first night he played, he had on like a trench coat with no shirt and like some boxers or something under it. And the crowd just booed him. Boo! Get off the stage. And, he kept playing, and, because he was very comfortable with his music. The next night, opening night, second night or whatever, he warms up for him. Same scenario. Boo! Get off the stage. Third night, you would think, okay, maybe he put on a shirt, some pants or something, maybe he'll switch up who he is a little bit just to make sure the crowd is not going to boo him, give him a chance to play his music. No, he just didn't show up. He decided that day, I'm only going to play for an audience that wants to hear me the way I am, how I am. And so from that point forward, he just told him he wasn't going to open up for him and did his own thing. He attracted the audience that was into what he was into, and he performed for them, and the rest is history. So why can't you do the same? Why can't you be who you are and attract the audience that's meant to hear what you have to say?
I don't want to add or subtract anything from that, Rod. I want that to just settle. So, Rod Brinson, tell us how we can find you and how, if someone wants to do business with you, give us all your information.
My name is Rod Brinson. You can find me at rodbrinson.com. I am the brand strategist. Currently focused on building a community of entrepreneurs who are trying to figure their personal brand out, trying to understand where the lines are blurred and if they should focus on corporate or being a business owner or doing both, and how do you do that? So we've been thriving for quite some time. It's called House of Brand. You can find that at community.rodbrinson.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a note or DM. I'm across all social platforms. You're going to get the same Rod that you're getting on this podcast.
That was a great conversation. Thanks for listening to the Business of Marketing podcast. I'm Rocio Osuna.
And I'm A. Judge. Catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Marketing podcast, a show brought to you by ContentMonster.com, the producer of B2B digital marketing content. Show notes can be found on ContentMonster.com, as well as ALeeJudge.com.